Nearly half the brawlers in Brawl Stars have hypercharges, with new ones being added each update. It's clear to say that some grant massive power spikes, while others are just completely useless. That's why we're gonna take a look at what makes a good hypercharge and how to improve the flaws of the bad ones. Starting with the good, let's take a look at Leon's hypercharge. It allows him to attack his enemies while staying invisible. So, what makes it good? Let's just take a look at the criteria for a well-designed hypercharge. First, problem solving. It should address a brawler's super skill's weaknesses and enhance their role. Secondly, effective integration. It should fit well with the brawler's existing mechanics. Thirdly, innovation. It should bring something new and exciting to the brawler's abilities. And last but not least, role consistency. It should support the brawler's playstyle and stay true to their role. Now, let's see why Leon's hypercharge fits these criteria so well. First, it addresses a critical weakness by allowing him to attack while staying invisible, fixing the flaw of his attacks interrupting his super. Secondly, it integrates smoothly with his existing mechanics, allowing his star powers to be active during the hypercharge, so either he is healed or is gaining a speed buff. Thirdly, it brings something new to his kit by allowing him to attack while being invisible. For example, we can take a look at a hypercharge that scores poorly in innovation, such as Bull's, which simply provides an 80% damage reduction when using his super, whilst not introducing any exciting new elements. Building on this innovation, Leon's hypercharge also significantly enhances his role, allowing him to play more aggressively when using his super, suiting his assassin-like playstyle. Fang. Just like Leon, we can take a look at another example of a well-designed hypercharge. Fang's hypercharge allows him to charge through walls while dropping popcorn on the way. With that in mind, let's quickly break down why Fang's hypercharge is a strong example of good design. First, Fang's hypercharge solves the issue of his super being blocked by walls, allowing him to reach his targets no matter what. It also integrates smoothly with his star power, as additional damage from his hypercharge can lead to more takedowns, which in turn recharge his super, creating a cycle of continuous attacks. Third, by letting him pass through walls during his hypercharge, it innovates his kit, allowing new attack possibilities and forcing his enemies to be more cautious. And lastly, it fits his playstyle by making his gameplay more fluid and supporting his aggressive, relentless approach, which aligns perfectly with his role as an assassin. Now that we have covered what makes a good hypercharge, let's move on to the mid hypercharges. But before we continue, I'd appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video and want to see more. Not all hypercharges hit the mark perfectly. Some land somewhere in the middle, not quite game-changing but not entirely useless either. In this chapter we'll break down why some hypercharges land in this grey area and explain why some are limited to never reaching a good status. So, why do some hypercharges land in this mid area? Sometimes the key criteria we discussed in the last chapter are either missing or not well implemented, making it hard for the hypercharge to stand out. This is important because good design only stands out when there's something to compare it to. Without average or poor designs, the good ones would feel just as average. And even if a hypercharge is well designed, a brawler's base design might not have the needed foundation like a strong or useful super to support it. For example, Colt's hypercharge, which widens the super by 20%, fulfills these criteria effectively. It solves the problem of his super's narrow spread, making it easier for him to get team kills. Additionally, it introduces something new and fits his damage dealer playstyle. However, it's limited by cold space design, as the super is easily dodgeable and may only be useful against stationary targets like the heists. As a rule of thumb, hypercharges that affect the entire enemy team, like the ones from Max or Sandy, or ones that put pressure on the whole enemy team, like Fangs, generally perform the best. However, that doesn't mean hypercharges that only affect one brawler are bad or destined to be. They just have less potential to be pushed into the good hypercharge category. But we'll get to that later. For now, let's take a look at Belle's hypercharge, for example. Her hypercharge adds a homing effect to her super, which is useful and almost always provides value. However, it doesn't quite measure up to what the best hypercharges offer in terms of overall impact. In this chapter, we explored why some hypercharges land in the mid category. While they can be effective in specific situations, they don't quite make a lasting impact. Now let's explore the hypercharges that fall short and fail to make a meaningful impact. Starting with the ugly, first we are going to explore what causes a hypercharge to be bad. Then we'll discuss how to address their flaws and analyze some examples to see why and where the hypercharge designs fall short, and how they could be reworked or what to look at when designing a hypercharge. The main reason a hypercharge falls into the ugly category is when it fails to address a brawler's super's issues, or even worse, when it creates new problems. Also, meeting the other criteria we discussed at the beginning is important, but not as crucial. Some hypercharges may seem strong, but that strength doesn't necessarily mean they fit the brawler well. Often this is just because the brawler is overpowered at the moment, rather than the hypercharge being well designed. It's also crucial to remember that hypercharges are late game abilities, so they should be effective against skilled opponents, not just overpowered against noobs. To illustrate this, let's take a closer look at Frank's hypercharge. Seismic Smash makes his super hit an entire circle around him. To understand why Frank's hypercharge fails, first, let's look at what problems his super and base design have. Starting with his super, it has two main problems. First, it has a 1.5 second wind-up time, during which it can be cancelled by stuns or knockbacks. Second, because of his wind-up time, it is easily dodgeable. Secondly, when looking at his base design, Frank struggles on open maps due to his immobility and medium attack range, making walls and bushes crucial for his playstyle. Now, looking at Seismic Smash, it doesn't fix these problems. Frank is still vulnerable during the super's windup, and it even creates more issues. On one hand, it opens up a huge area, making him vulnerable to long-range brawlers. On the other hand, while the hypercharge hits an entire circle instead of a cone, its range is one tile shorter, making it even easier for skilled players to escape his super. Due to these flaws in the old hypercharge, I've designed a new one, Ground Shock, which aims to fix one of Frank's major weaknesses. Instead of just expanding the attack area, Ground Shock extends the super into a bigger cone shape. But here's the key difference. At the start of his hypercharged super, Frank stomps on the ground, creating a shockwave that catapults enemies from the far edge of his super's range toward him. This makes it much harder for the enemies to dodge and gives Frank a more reliable way to land his super. What do you think? Share your thoughts and ideas in the comments below. And now, let's move on to Jean's hypercharge. Hyper Hand splits Jean's super into 3 hands, each being able to grab an enemy. Neither does it fix his problems, nor does it align with his role. Instead, it introduces new problems. First, let's look at his base and role design to understand the problems he has. Jean is a controller with average HP and a highly useful super. However, his low damage output forces him to avoid playing aggressively, limiting his impact in direct fights. First, it's hard to land. Skilled opponents often dodge Jean's hand, resulting in a wasted super. Secondly, due to Jean's low damage output and slow unload time, pulling the wrong brawler can easily backfire. Looking at hyper hands, pulling more enemies becomes a liability, because Jean has single target damage. He cannot effectively deal with multiple enemies. Coupled with a slow unload speed, the faster pulling speed means less time the enemy is suppressed, becoming an additional burden. Just as we refined Frank's hypercharge, I've designed a new one for Jean called Smart Hand. Smart Hand introduces a slight auto-aim to a super, similar to Bell's magnetic hypercharge, fixing the inconsistency and enhancing his overall playstyle. That's pretty much it for now. Write what you'd like to see in the comments and see you in the next one.